The baby wasn't crying. That's what terrified him most. Clay Bennett had held death before, felt it in the weight of his infant son, in the stillness of his wife's hand. Now kneeling in snow that burned his knees, staring at blue lips and frost-kissed eyelashes, he made a promise to a God he'd stopped believing in 2 years ago. Not this one. You don't get this one. His hands shook as he tucked her inside his coat. 3 miles to shelter. She had minutes, maybe less. He rode like the devil himself was chasing. Before we begin, if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And please subscribe to this channel and stay with us until the very end. You won't regret it. Clay Bennett's mare stopped dead at Bennett Creek, crossing, ears pinned, flat nostrils flaring white clouds into frozen air. What's got into you, girl? Clay dismounted, boots crunching through snow that had been falling since dawn. Late November in Montana Territory had a way of making men forget what warmth felt like. That's when he saw it. A basket, woven willow, the kind that took skilled hands and patience, half buried where the creek bent east, dusted with snow like someone had tried to hide it, or like the storm had tried to erase it. Clay's heart kicked hard. He knew before he reached it. Knew in the way a man knows when lightning's about to strike or when winter will kill. Inside, wrapped in a shawl with initials he couldn't make out in the dying light, lay a baby. A girl. Her lips were blue. Frost gathered on tiny eyelashes. She wasn't crying. Dear God, she wasn't crying. Clay hadn't held an infant since his son stopped breathing in Sarah's arms 2 years back. Since Sarah herself followed 3 days later, leaving him with a hole so deep he figured he'd fall into it forever. He'd buried them both under cottonwoods at the edge of his property, and swore to whatever was listening he'd never feel that kind of breaking again. His hands shook as he lifted the baby free. She weighed nothing, and everything. Her chest rose, fell, rose again, shallow and slow. No, he said to the wind, to God, to the gathering dark. No, you don't get this one. He tucked her inside his coat against his chest, where his heart hammered panic and prayer in equal measure. The cold burned through his shirt, but the baby's skin felt colder, like touching snow that had forgotten what sun was. Clay mounted in one fluid motion born of necessity, holding her pressed tight. The mare sensed his urgency and lunged forward through deepening drifts. Behind them, fresh powder erased the basket, the tracks, everything. Like the world wanted to pretend this hadn't happened. Guess you're my family now, Clay whispered into wind that stole his words. Hear me, little one. You're mine. So you fight. You understand, you fight. The baby didn't answer, didn't move. Just that shallow rise and fall that could stop any second. Clay rode hard for home, 3 miles that felt like 30 through twilight that bled into full dark. His cabin sat at the base of the mountains, a single room with a stone fireplace he'd let go cold before riding to town for supplies. Stupid. So damn stupid. He kicked the door open, laid the baby on his bed, the bed where Sarah died, where he hadn't slept since preferring the chair by the fire. His hands fumbled with flint and steel. The baby made a sound, not a cry. Something worse. A weak mewling that faded even as he listened. No, 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 no. Clay got kindling, smoking, then flame. Fed it larger pieces with shaking fingers that wouldn't work right. Hold on, just hold on. He'd delivered calves in snowstorms, set broken bones on horses, buried his wife with his own shovel. But this sound, this dying sound, paralyzed him in ways nothing else had. Sarah used to heat milk for orphaned animals. The thought came clear, her voice in his memory. Not too hot, Clay, or you'll burn their mouths. Clay found a bottle, poured goat's milk from the cold box, held it too close to flame. Pain shot through his palm. He cursed, tried again, tested it on his wrist, like he'd seen Sarah do 100 times. The baby refused it at first. Turned her head, still making that awful fading sound. Then hunger won over fear, and she latched on desperately, gulping air and milk together in a way that couldn't be right, but was better than silence. Clay sank into the chair by the fire, this tiny creature in his arms, and had absolutely no idea what came next. She was burning up. He could feel fever through the blankets. How could she be freezing and burning at the same time? Her breathing rattled, wrong, wet and struggling. He tried laying her in the bed. She screamed a real scream this time, stronger, angry. He tried the chair. More screaming. So he paced, rocking her awkwardly, humming hymns his mother sang when he was small. Hymns he hadn't thought of in 20 years. Rock of ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. Nothing worked. Near 3 a.m, exhaustion made him honest. I don't know what I'm doing, he told, her voice breaking in the empty cabin. I got no business with a baby, lost my own son, couldn't save him, couldn't save Sarah, but I won't let you die. That's all I got. That's all I can promise. Maybe she heard something true in that. Maybe she was just too tired to fight. Either way, she went still against his shoulder, her small body curving into his, like she'd been carved to fit there. Clay was afraid to move, afraid to breathe too hard. Gray light crept through the window. He realized 2 things. She was still burning with fever, and he needed help he didn't have. The nearest doctor was in Bennett's Creek, 6 miles through snow. Questions would follow. Whose baby? Where'd she come from? What was a widowed rancher doing with an infant? He looked down at her flushed face, at lips no longer blue, but red with fever, at the way her tiny hand had curled around his finger. Didn't matter what followed. She needed more than he could give alone. Clay wrapped her in every blanket he owned, rebuilt the fire to last, and rode toward Bennett's Creek as the sun rose blood red over frozen plains. The bell over Harmon's general store rang like judgment. Every head turned. Clay Bennett, known for keeping to himself since his wife passed, known for being at his ranch or nowhere, stood in the doorway holding a bundle that moved and whimpered. 15 townspeople stopped mid-conversation. Ruth Winslow reached him first. She ran the boarding house, had kind eyes and capable hands. Clay, Lord above, is that? Found her, he said quickly, voice rough from no sleep. Creek crossing, yesterday at twilight. She's got fever. Ruth touched the baby's forehead, frowned deep. Come on. She guided him to the counter, already gathering supplies. Sarah, fetch goat's milk, the good kind. Tom, get clean cloth for diapers. Move. People moved. But they watched. Whispered. Sheriff Tom Briggs approached slowly, hat in hand. Good man. Fair man. But a lawman first. That your baby, Clay? No, sir. Like I said, found her. Basket in the snow. No note. No tracks. Fresh powder covered everything. The sheriff studied him with eyes that had seen men lie and men tell truth. You aiming to keep her? Clay's jaw set. Till her people are found. And if they ain't found... Before Clay could answer, Warren Kent pushed through the crowd. Bank owner, town council, the kind of man who measured everything by property and propriety. His smile didn't reach his eyes. A single man raising a girl child. Kent's voice carried meant to. That ain't proper, Bennett. Territorial orphanage in Butte takes foundlings. They've got women. Resources. Something cold settled in Clay's chest. She was left in my path. Reckon that means something. Means someone abandoned her, Kent pressed. Don't mean you're fit to parent. Ruth Winslow stepped between them, bristling like a hen protecting chicks. Warren Kent, this child needs medicine and warmth, not your politics. Clay's doing what's right. I'm doing what the law requires, Kent said stiffly. Clay looked down at the baby. Barely breathing yesterday. Fever hot today. Completely dependent on strangers who were already deciding her fate like she was property to be assigned. I'm calling her Hope, he said, voice steady clear. Seemed right given the circumstances. The room went quiet. Naming her made it real, made it a claim. Ruth smiled, something fierce and approving in it. Hope Bennett, that's a fine name. She turned to Clay, squeezed his arm. I'll teach you what you need to know. Feeding, washing, reading her signs. You won't be alone in this. Some folks nodded approval. Others looked away, already judging, already disapproving. Sheriff Briggs cleared his throat. Keep me informed, Clay. Any news about family, you report it. Understood. Yes, sir. As Clay paid for supplies more than he'd planned, more than he could afford. Ruth walked him to the door. She kept her voice low for his ears only. There was a girl, Mary Reed, left town 3 months back. Cattle baron's daughter, Eli Reed, from up north. She was pregnant, unwed. Nobody's seen her since. Clay looked down at Hope, sleeping now, against his shoulder face, still flushed with fever, but breathing easier. The shawl she'd been wrapped in had initials stitched in fine thread barely visible. M.R. His hands tightened on the basket of supplies. Thank you, Ruth. Don't thank me yet. Her eyes were sad, knowing. This road you're walking, it ain't going to be easy. Good things never are. Clay carried Hope back into the cold. December came in with snow and silence. Clay Bennett learned more in 6 weeks than in 6 years of ranching. Babies, he discovered, had opinions about everything. Temperature, hunger, wetness, boredom. Hope had more opinions than most. Ruth Winslow visited daily teaching with patients Clay didn't know existed outside of saints. Like this. She showed him folding cloth for diapers. Not too tight, she needs to breathe. Not too loose or you'll have a mess. How do you know when she's hungry versus when she just wants holding? The sharp cry means hunger. The building wail means wet diaper. The exhausted whimper means she needs to sleep but doesn't know how. Ruth smiled at his bewildered expression. You'll learn. Talk to her, Clay. Babies need voices like they need milk. So Clay talked. Told her about the land, the weather, his plans for spring planting. Read to her from Sarah's Bible Genesis, mostly because beginnings felt right. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. He read one night. Hope staring at him with dark eyes that seemed to understand more than they should. Even the marked ones get protection, little Hope. Don't that give a man pause? The community began to soften slowly, grudgingly. Women brought baby clothes, hand-stitched blankets, said things like, poor little thing, and you're doing right by her, Clay. Men nodded respectfully when Clay came to town for supplies. Even Sheriff Briggs admitted, you're doing more than right by that child, Clay. More than right. Week 5, everything changed. Clay was changing Hope's diaper, still clumsy at it, but better than before, less fumbling when she smiled at him. Not gas, not accident, a real smile, eyes crinkling, directed straight at his face. He froze. Then tears came like spring runoff, fast, unexpected, unstoppable. First he'd cried since standing over Sarah's grave with dirt on his hands and a hole in his chest where his heart used to be. Well now, he managed, voice broken and breaking. Guess we're going to be just fine, you and me. That evening, Ruth stayed late. They sat by the fire after Hope fell asleep, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm, comfortable in silence that didn't need filling. Clay found himself talking about Sarah, about their son who never drew breath, about 2 years spent half alive going through motions wondering why God let him keep breathing when everything worth living for was under cottonwood trees. You were meant to find her, Ruth said quietly, firelight catching in her eyes. Some things ain't coincidence, Clay. Some things are grace. Their hands were close on the table, almost touching. Clay looked at Ruth, really looked like he was seeing her for the first time. Kind eyes, strong hands. A widow same as him. Maybe lonely same as him. He pulled back. I'm still figuring out how to be half alive again. Don't know about more than that. Ruth smiled, sad but understanding. That's all right. Hope's teaching you. I can wait. 2 days later, a letter arrived from Denver. Official seal. Lawyer script. Clay stared at it on his table for 3 days like it was a rattlesnake coiled and waiting. When he finally opened it, the words felt like winter coming back. Ambrose Keating, attorney at law, Denver, Colorado Territory. Representing Mr. Eli Reed, prominent Montana cattle baron. Sir, it is my duty to inform you that my client's daughter, Mary Reed, recently passed from fever. Before dying, she confessed to leaving her infant daughter in the care of a rancher on the Bennett Road. My client demands the immediate return of his granddaughter to his estate. Failure to comply will result in legal action. You will be contacted shortly regarding arrangements. Clay's hands shook holding the paper. He rode to town in silence, found Ruth at the boarding house, handed her the letter without speaking. She read it twice, lips pressing thinner each time. "Read it again," Clay said, voice hollow. "Tell me it says something different." It didn't. Ruth gripped his hands across the table, her fingers warm, steady, real. "Clay, he's got lawyers, money, blood claim. What do I got? You've got every midnight feeding, every fever you walked her through, every moment that child needed someone and found you there. That's what you've got. Judge won't see it that way. Then we make him see it." Clay pulled away, paced to the window. Outside, Bennett's Creek went about its business. People who didn't know his world was ending. "Tell me about Mary Reed." Ruth's voice went soft, careful. "Brilliant girl, gentle. Was engaged to a schoolteacher named Thomas Webb. Good man, no money. Eli forbade the marriage, threatened violence." She paused, looked away. "Thomas died in a ranch accident 6 months back. Folks whispered it wasn't an accident. Mary fled to Denver the next week." "Pregnant," Clay said, "and heartbroken." "Eli Reed is a hard man, Clay. Controls everything, everyone. Mary knew he'd do the same to her baby. So she left hope with a stranger. She left hope with you." Ruth's eyes were fierce. "That wasn't chance, Clay. Mary watched you, knew your character, trusted you with what she loved most." The door opened without knocking. Warren Kent stepped in, smile oily and satisfied. "Bennett. Heard about the Reed letter. Terrible situation, but family's family. Blood matters. What do you want, Warren?" "Just offering counsel. Man like Eli Reed, he's got connections. Judges, politicians. Fighting him would be..." Kent shrugged. "Unwise. Best to let the child go to her rightful family." Clay crossed the room slowly, deliberately. "Get out." "I'm trying to help." "You're trying to get Reed's banking business. Now get out before I help you out." Kent left, but his smile widened. "You'll see reason eventually, Bennett. They always do." When the door closed, Ruth said quietly, "He's circulating a petition. Concerned citizens asking that Hope be placed with her blood family." Clay looked at Hope, sleeping in the basket Ruth kept at the boarding house. 2 months old now, starting to laugh, recognized his voice, called to him in her baby way. "When's Reed arriving?" "1 week." Clay nodded slowly, something hardening in his chest. Not anger, determination. "Then we got 1 week to figure out how to fight money and blood with nothing but love." "Love ain't nothing," Ruth said fiercely. "It's everything." Outside, the first snow of real winter began to fall, and somewhere north, a grandfather Clay had never met was already traveling south to take away the only family Clay had left. 7 days felt like 7 minutes and 7 years all at once. Clay worked his ranch with Hope strapped to his chest in a sling Ruth had fashioned from blankets. The baby watched everything with dark eyes that seemed to take in more than an infant, should the way he mended fence posts, the way he talked to the horses, the way he stopped sometimes and just held her close like she might disappear. "Your mama was brave," he told her on the 3rd day, mucking out stalls while she dozed against his heartbeat. "Braver than most folks will ever know. She loved you enough to let you go. That's a kind of love that breaks you and makes you whole at the same time. Hope made a small sound in her sleep, and Clay's throat tightened. I won't let you down. Won't let her down. I promise you that. Ruth came every evening after the boarding house settled, brought food. Clay forgot to cook, checked on Hope, sat with Clay by the fire. While they didn't talk about the thing, neither wanted to say aloud. We could run, Clay said on the fifth night, voice low. Take Hope. Go to California, Oregon, somewhere Reed's money don't reach. Ruth's hand stilled on the coffee cup. You'd be running the rest of your life. Hope would grow up knowing she was taken, not chosen, knowing you were a fugitive, not a father. Better than losing her. Is it? Ruth's eyes were gentle, but firm. Clay running ain't protecting. It's just slow dying in a different place. He knew she was right. Hated that she was right. On the sixth day, Sheriff Briggs rode out to the ranch, sat his horse at a respectful distance while Clay stood on the porch, Hope in his arms. Clay, Reed arrives tomorrow. Noon train. I know. He's bringing lawyers, 3 of them. Judge Franklin's already in town. Clay's jaw tightened. Franklin owes his appointment to men like Reed. I know that too. Briggs removed his hat, turned it in his hands. I got to tell you, legal standing ain't on your side. Blood claim's powerful, and Reed's got resources you don't. You telling me to give up? I'm telling you the truth. Briggs met his eyes. But I'm also telling you I've been sheriff 20 years. Seen a lot of men claim to be fathers. Most ain't worth the title. You are. That's got to count for something. Does it? It does to me. I'll testify to that if it comes to court. After Briggs left, Clay sat on the porch steps, Hope bundled against the December cold, and watched the sun set behind mountains that didn't care about human troubles. Tomorrow changes everything, he told her. But whatever happens, you remember this. You were wanted. Every day. Every moment. You saved me when I was drowning. Don't ever forget that. Hope grabbed his finger with her whole tiny fist and held on like she understood. The train arrived at noon, black smoke and screaming metal, and the smell of coal that meant civilization was coming whether you wanted it or not. Clay stood on the platform, Hope in his arms, Ruth beside him. Half the town had gathered, some to support, some to witness, some just for the spectacle of it. The train doors opened. Eli Reed stepped onto the platform like a king surveying conquered territory. He was 60, maybe older, but hard as railroad iron. Gray beard trimmed precise. Expensive coat that cost more than Clay's ranch. Eyes that measured everything and found most of it wanting. 2 lawyers flanked him carrying document cases like weapons. A hired nurse followed ready to take the baby. Warren Kent rushed forward immediately. Mr. Reed, on behalf of Bennett's Creek, let me express our sympathies for your loss. Your daughter Mary was... Where's the child? Reed's voice cut through pleasantries like an axe through kindling. Sheriff Briggs gestured. Clay Bennett's been caring for her since November. Reed's gaze found Clay, measured him, dismissed him in 3 seconds. Bring her here. No, sir, Clay said quietly. The platform went silent. Even the train seemed to hold its breath. I beg your pardon? Said no. She's content where she is. Reed's jaw worked a muscle jumping. That child is my granddaughter, my blood, my heir. You've no legal claim. Got a moral one. One of Reed's lawyers stepped forward, a thin man with spectacles and the smile of someone used to winning. Mr. Bennett, my client is prepared to offer $5,000 as compensation for your trouble. That's more than generous. She ain't trouble, Clay interrupted. She's my daughter, and she ain't for sale. The platform erupted. Half the crowd shouted support. The other half argued for Reed. Sheriff Briggs had to bang his rifle butt on the wooden planks for silence. Warren Kent produced a document holding it high. I have here 30 signatures from concerned citizens. They attest that Mr. Bennett, while well-meaning, is unfit for custody. He's unmarried, isolated, lacks adequate resources for raising a young girl properly. He's loved her. Ruth Winslow stepped forward, voice shaking but holding steady. Every day, every night, every moment she needed someone. That's more than resources. That's everything. Reed turned his cold gaze on her. And who are you? Ruth Winslow. I run the boarding house. Her voice strengthened. And I know something about losing children to wealthy relatives who think money matters more than love. She told them, then told the whole crowd about her niece. 5 years old, orphaned, placed with a distant uncle who had property and standing. The uncle neglected her, focused on his business, and social standing let her die of preventable illness, while his money sat untouched in banks. Money don't make a parent, Ruth said, voice carrying clear. Love does. Daily, unglamorous, exhausting love. The kind Clay Bennett's shown every single day since he found hope freezing in that basket. The crowd shifted visibly. Some nodded. Others looked away, uncomfortable. Reed stood. When he spoke, his voice was glacier cold. What can you give her that I cannot? Bennett speak honestly. Clay met his eyes without flinching. A father who chose her. Not a grandfather who drove her mother to an early grave. Reed's hand shook, just for a moment. Something cracked in that iron face, pain raw and real before it sealed again. Judge Franklin arrives on tonight's train. We'll settle this legally. He turned and walked toward the hotel lawyers, following like ravens. The crowd dispersed, slowly whispering. Clay stood on the platform, holding hope, feeling like he'd just lost a battle he hadn't even known how to fight. Ruth touched his arm. You spoke true. That matters. Truth don't beat money in a courtroom. Sometimes it does. We got to believe that. But her eyes said she didn't believe it either. That night, Clay sat at his table, Hope asleep in the basket beside him, writing a letter by lamplight. To Hope, when you're old enough to read this, your mama loved you enough to save you. She chose me because she knew I'd keep you safe till you could be strong. You were wanted every day, every moment. You saved me when I was drowning. Don't ever forget that. If you're reading this, it means I lost you. Means the law took you from me despite everything I tried. I want you to know it wasn't your fault. And it wasn't mine. Sometimes the world just don't care about what's right. But you were loved. Are loved. Will always be loved. Your father, Clay Bennett. He folded it, placed it in the basket beneath her blankets. His hands shook. A knock at the door made him jump. Ruth stood in the doorway, snow dusting her shoulders. Can't sleep either. Didn't even try. She came in, shook off snow, moved to the fire. They stood side by side, watching flames not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. I'm scared, Ruth. The words came out broken. I'm scared in a way I haven't been since Sarah died. Maybe more because this time I know exactly what losing feels like. Then we fight harder. How I got no money for lawyers, no standing in court. Reed's right, I'm nobody, just a rancher with a dead wife and a borrowed baby. Ruth turned to him, grabbed his face in both hands, fierce and gentle at once. You listen to me, Clay Bennett. You are not nobody. You are the man who rode through a blizzard to save a dying child. The man who learned to be a father when your heart was still broken. The man who stands up to power because it's right, not because it's easy. That's not nobody. That's everything. She kissed him then. Quick, soft over before he could respond. Pulled back with tears in her eyes. I'll stand with you tomorrow, whatever happens. She left before he could find words. Clay stood alone in his cabin, hand touching his lips, something cracking open in his chest that had been sealed shut for 2 years. Hope whimpered in her sleep. He picked her up, held her close, and whispered into her soft hair. I love you. Whatever the law says, whatever happens tomorrow, that don't change. I love you. Judge Franklin arrived on the evening train, a territorial appointee who owed his position to men like Reed. The hearing was set for the next morning at the town hall. Clay barely slept. Paced his cabin with Hope, memorizing her face, the way she grabbed his finger when he touched her palm, the small sounds she made, dreaming the weight of her against his chest. At dawn, he fed her, changed her, dressed her in the best clothes Ruth had sewn. Put the embroidered shawl around her, the one Mary had made her last gift. "Your mama was smart," he told Hope. "She knew exactly what she was doing. Trusted me with you because she saw something I didn't see in myself." I hope to God she was right. The town hall was packed. Every citizen who could walk had come to watch. Clay stood near the back, Hope in his arms, Ruth beside him. He could feel eyes on them, some sympathetic, some disapproving, most just curious. Eli Reed sat at the front table, lawyers flanking him like guards. The hired nurse sat behind them, ready. Judge Franklin took his seat, a thin man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much compromise. "This is an informal hearing to determine temporary custody of the minor child currently called Hope Bennett, pending formal proceedings. Mr. Reed, you've brought suit for custody. State your claim." Reed's lead lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client is the child's biological grandfather. His daughter, Mary Reed, recently deceased, confessed before dying that she left her infant in the care of a rancher. My client seeks to fulfill his duty as blood relative and provide for his granddaughter's welfare. He has substantial means of proper household and the legal right to family custody." Franklin nodded. "Mr. Bennett, you oppose this claim." Clay stood slowly, Hope in his arms. "I do, Your Honor." "On what grounds?" "You have no biological relation, no legal adoption, no standing as guardian." "On the grounds that I'm her father." Clay's voice was steady. "Maybe not by blood, but by every other measure that matters. I found her dying, brought her back, cared for her every day and night since. She knows my voice, my face, my heartbeat. That's got to count for something." Franklin's expression didn't change. "The law recognizes biological claims over emotional ones, Mr. Bennett. Unless you can demonstrate unfitness or danger, blood prevails." Warren Kent stood waving his petition. "Your Honor, I have 30 signatures attesting to Mr. Bennett's unsuitability. He's unmarried, lives in isolation, lacks the resources and social standing appropriate for raising a young girl." Ruth shot to her feet. "That petition's a lie, and everyone here knows it. Clay Bennett's more fit than most married men with money. Character don't come from bank accounts." "Sit down, Mrs. Winslow," Franklin said wearily. "This isn't a town meeting." "Then make it one." Sheriff Briggs stood. "Your Honor, I've been lawman here 20 years. Know most folks in this territory. Clay Bennett's as good a man as I've met. I'll testify to his character." Others stood then. The blacksmith, the general store owner, women who'd taught Clay to care for Hope, one by one speaking over Franklin's protests. He brought her to town first thing seeking help. He's learned everything about baby care in 2 months. That child smiles when she sees him, real smiles. He ain't doing this for show. He's doing it because he loves her." Reed sat silent through all of it, face unreadable. Finally, Franklin banged his gavel. "Enough. This court appreciates community sentiment, but the law is clear." He turned to Clay. "Mr. Bennett, I'm ordering temporary custody transferred to Mr. Reed pending formal hearing in 3 weeks. You have until tomorrow at dawn to surrender the child." The courtroom erupted. Ruth grabbed Clay's arm. Hope, sensing tension, began to cry. Clay stood frozen, the words hitting like physical blows. "Tomorrow at dawn." Reed's lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client is prepared to take custody now." "Dawn," Franklin repeated firmly. "Mr. Bennett deserves one final night. This court is adjourned." Clay walked out into winter sun that felt too bright, too indifferent. People tried to talk to him, condolences, anger, promises to appeal, but he heard nothing over the roaring in his ears. Ruth followed him to his horse. "Clay." "I need to go home, Ruth. Need to—" He couldn't finish. She squeezed his hand. Didn't say it would be all right. Didn't lie. I'll come by tonight. Clay rode home through a world that had turned gray. At his cabin, he did everything one last time. Fed Hope her bottle, watching her drink with that desperate baby intensity. Changed her diaper, making her giggle by blowing on her stomach. Rocked her to sleep while humming hymns, feeling her small body curve into his, like she'd been made to fit there. When she slept, he wept. Silently, so he wouldn't wake her. Tears dripping into her blankets, while she dreamed innocent dreams about a world that made sense. He packed her basket carefully. The clothes Ruth had sewn. Toys men had carved. The embroidered shawl. The letter he'd written placed beneath everything where someday maybe she'd find it, and know. Near midnight, hoofbeats approached. Clay tensed hand, moving toward his rifle. But it was Reed. Alone. No lawyers, no nurse. Just an old man on a horse looking suddenly smaller than he had at the hearing. Reed dismounted slowly, stood in the yard without approaching the porch. I won't apologize for wanting my granddaughter Bennett. Didn't ask you to. But I'll ask you a question, and I want honest answer. Reed's voice was rough. What would Mary want? Clay came to the porch edge. Your daughter. My daughter. Something broke in Reed's voice. The girl I failed. The woman I drove away. What would she want for Hope? The question hung between them like a bridge or a chasm. Clay chose truth. She'd want Hope raised with kindness, not money, not legacy, just kindness, the kind you maybe didn't show Mary. Reed's shoulders bowed. His face was wet, tears catching in his beard. I killed my daughter Bennett, my pride, my need to control. I drove Mary away, threatened the man she loved. Thomas Webb was a good man, a school teacher. No money, no standing, but he loved Mary true. I couldn't see past that to what mattered. He wiped his eyes roughly. Thomas died in an accident at my ranch. Folks whispered I arranged it. I didn't. But I might as well have. My foreman knew what I wanted. Knew Thomas was trouble, found a way to solve it. I didn't ask questions I should have asked. Clay said nothing. Let the confession come. Mary ran the next week. Pregnant, heartbroken. She knew. Knew I'd ruin her baby same way I ruined her. So she... Reed's voice broke completely. She gave Hope to a stranger rather than trust her own father. That's what I did. That's who I am. So don't be that, Clay said quietly. Be better. That's what Mary's giving you, a second chance to be the grandfather you weren't a father. Reed looked up at this simple rancher who'd taught him more in 5 minutes than 60 years had managed. The sky opened up. Not snow. A blizzard. Vicious, sudden, the kind that killed travelers who got caught without shelter. Reed looked at the wall of white descending. I need to get back to town. You'll die trying. Storm like this, you won't find the road. Clay hesitated, then stepped aside. You can wait it out here. You'd shelter me, the man taking your daughter. You're Hope's grandfather. She should know you. Even if... Clay couldn't finish. Come inside before you freeze. They spent that night in Clay's cabin. The blizzard raged outside while inside an uneasy truce formed. Reed sat in the chair by the fire. Clay paced with Hope when she woke crying. Neither man slept. Near dawn of the first day, Hope's fever spiked again. Clay worked frantically cool cloths medicine. Ruth had left desperate prayers. Reed watched, saw how Clay's hands shook, how he talked to Hope in a low, steady voice even when she screamed, how he checked her breathing every few minutes like he was terrified she'd stop. You've done this before, Reed said. Fought fever. Lost before, Clay said shortly. My son, my wife, 3 days apart. Won't lose again. Reed came closer. Let me help. I raised Mary. Before I ruined everything, I knew how to be a father. Reed's voice was rough. Let me try to remember. They worked together through the rest of that day and into night. Reed held Hope while Clay heated broth. Clay walked her when Reed's arms got tired. They took turns barely speaking, focused only on keeping this small life breathing. Hope's fever broke near midnight. Both men sagged with relief. "Thank you," Clay said quietly. Reed looked at him. "For what?" "For caring. For trying. For—" Clay gestured helplessly. "For being here." The second day the blizzard still raged. They were trapped. Clay cooked what little food he had. Reed told stories about Mary the good years before everything went wrong. She loved horses. Reed said, voice distant with memory. "Had a way with them I never understood. Could gentle the wildest colt just by talking. Thomas used to say she could gentle anything wild, including him. She sounds remarkable." She was. Reed's eyes were wet. "And I destroyed her. Tried to control who she loved, what she wanted, how she lived. Thought I knew best. Thought money and position mattered more than happiness." He looked at Hope sleeping in Clay's arms. "She proved me wrong. Gave up everything, home, family, security, rather than let me control her baby. She was protecting Hope. She was protecting Hope from me." Reed met Clay's eyes. "Tell me honest, Bennett, am I the villain in this story?" Clay considered. "I think you're a man who loved wrong and is learning to love right. Ain't too late for that." The third day, the storm finally broke. They stood on the porch watching sunrise paint fresh snow gold. Hope was bundled between them, healthy again, making small noises at the light. Reed reached out carefully, touched her cheek. She grabbed his finger, held tight. "Guess you're my family now, too," Reed whispered. Clay saw it then, the change. Real change, earned through 3 days of shared fear and shared relief. This wasn't the Iron Man from the train platform. This was a grandfather learning what grandfathers should be. "The hearing," Clay said. "It's today." "I know. You still mean to take her." Reed was silent for a long time. Then, "I don't know anymore, Bennett. I truly don't know." They rode to town together through snow that glittered like broken promises. The town hall was packed again. Judge Franklin, looking annoyed at the delay, called them to order. "Mr. Reed, are you prepared to take custody?" Reed stood slowly. The whole room held its breath. "Your Honor." His voice was clear, steady. "I withdraw my claim." Chaos erupted. Franklin banged his gavel. "Mr. Reed, do you understand what you're saying? I understand that my daughter chose this man for a reason." Reed turned to face the crowd. "Mary knew me. Knew I'd smother her child with control and expectation, same as I did to her. She chose love over legacy. I won't dishonor her final act of courage." He turned to Clay. "I'd like to establish a trust fund for Hope's education. No strings. You'll have full custody, but I'd like to visit sometimes, if that's acceptable." Clay looked at this man who'd terrified him, who'd nearly destroyed everything, saw grief, regret, and the first fragile shoots of redemption. "Hope should know her grandfather," Clay said carefully. "As long as you remember, you're a grandfather now, not a king." Reed smiled, small broken reel. "I'll remember." Warren Kent shot to his feet, face red. "Your Honor, the petition has been withdrawn," Sheriff Briggs said loudly, standing. "By its signatories, including me. I signed thinking money mattered. I was wrong." One by one others stood, apologized, recanted. Men who'd doubted Clay now testified to his character. Women who'd whispered now spoke his praise. Kent sat down slowly, deflated, defeated. Judge Franklin looked at Clay Bennett, simple rancher, widowed and alone until he wasn't. "The court recognizes that family is built, not born. Custody granted to Clay Bennett. Guardianship formalized. This court is adjourned." Ruth grabbed Clay's hand. Hope, sitting on his lap, laughed at nothing and everything. Outside, people filed into winter sun that suddenly felt warm again. Reed approached slowly. I don't deserve forgiveness, Bennett. No, sir, Clay agreed. But Hope deserves a grandfather. So I reckon we'll all learn together. The old man nodded, reached out, touched Hope's cheek again. She grabbed his finger, held tight, smiled her toothless baby smile. Reed broke then. Wept openly right there on the town hall steps, while Clay held Hope and Ruth held Clay. And somewhere, maybe Mary Reed finally rested easy. The town hall steps cleared slowly, folks lingering to shake Clay's hand or touch Hope's cheek like she was something sacred they needed to witness. Reed stood apart, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief that probably cost more than Clay's winter supplies, looking lost in a way money couldn't fix. Ruth squeezed Clay's arm. I need to get back to the boarding house. Got guests wondering where breakfast is. She smiled, eyes bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. Come by later, all three of you. We will. She left, and Clay was alone with Hope and the man who'd almost destroyed them. Bennett. Reed's voice was rough, scraped raw. I meant what I said in there. The trust fund. I'll have my lawyers draw up papers with no conditions, no control. Just money for her future. That's generous. It's the least I can do. Reed looked at Hope sleeping now against Clay's shoulder, exhausted from all the noise and tension. She looks like Mary. Around the eyes. I never knew Mary. She had kind eyes. Saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. Reed's throat worked. Even me, I suppose, until I proved her wrong. They stood in uncomfortable silence. Snow crunched under boots as the last townspeople headed home. Warren Kent passed without looking at them, shoulders hunched, defeated. There's something you should know, Reed said finally. About Thomas Webb, the baby's father. Clay waited. I told you it was an accident at my ranch. That was true. But there's more. Reed's hands shook. Thomas was a good teacher. Better than good. He had offers from schools back East Boston, Philadelphia. Places that would have paid him well given him standing. He turned them all down because Mary was here. He loved her. He did, and I couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand that my daughter chose a poor school teacher over the future I'd planned for her. Reed's voice dropped. I didn't order Thomas killed, but I made it clear to my foreman, made it clear to everyone that Thomas Webb was a problem that needed solving. I didn't say how. Didn't need to. The confession hung between them like smoke. Thomas was helping repair a barn roof, green timber unstable. My foreman knew it. Sent him up anyway. Timber gave way. Thomas fell 30 feet onto frozen ground. Took him 3 hours to die. Reed's face twisted. Mary was there. Held his hand while he bled inside. His last words were telling her to run. To take the baby and run from me. Clay felt sick. She did. Not far enough. Or maybe too far. I don't know anymore. Reed looked at Hope. She died alone in Denver. Fever, the doctor said. But I think it was a broken heart. I think I killed both of them, Thomas and Mary, just as sure as if I'd pushed that timber myself. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know what kind of man wants to visit that baby, what kind of grandfather she's got. Reed met his eyes. If you say no, if you tell me to leave and never come back, I'll understand. I'll send the money and stay away. Let you raise her clean without my shadow. Clay looked at Hope, felt her small, warm weight, her trust. Thought about Mary Reed watching him from afar, choosing him because she saw something good. Thought about Thomas Webb's last words, run from me. You can visit, Clay said quietly. But not as the man you were, as the man you're trying to be. The second you forget that the second you try to control or manipulate or play the cattle baron, you're done. You understand? I understand. And you'll tell Hope the truth when she's old enough. About Mary. About Thomas. About your part in it. No lies, no softening. She deserves to know where she comes from. Reed nodded slowly. That's more than fair, Bennett. More than I deserve. Probably. But Mary loved you once. Must have had a reason. I'm betting on that reason being real somewhere under all the money and pride. Reed's eyes filled again. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just do right by her. That's all the thanks needed. They shook hands, then awkward and formal, sealing a truce neither of them trusted, but both needed. Reed climbed into his hired carriage. Before the driver could snap the reins, he leaned out. Bennett. One more thing. Warren Kent. He's bitter now. Humiliated. Men like that they don't forget. Watch yourself. The carriage pulled away, wheels crunching through snow. Clay stood alone in the empty street, hope sleeping against his chest, and realized for the first time in 2 years, he wasn't alone at all. The next weeks passed like a dream that felt too good to last. Clay fell into rhythms he'd forgotten existed: morning feedings while coffee brewed, afternoons working the ranch with Hope, watching from a sling, evenings with Ruth coming by to share supper and laughter. Hope grew, changed daily, learned to grab things deliberately, to laugh at silly faces, to track Clay's movements across the room with dark eyes that missed nothing. Reed visited twice. The first time he arrived with gifts, expensive baby clothes, a carved cradle, toys from Denver shops. Too much, too fancy, trying to buy back time. Clay met him at the door. She don't need silk dresses, Reed. She needs a grandfather who listens. The second visit was better. Reed came with nothing but himself, sat awkwardly on the floor, while Hope played with wooden blocks Clay had carved, told stories about Mary as a little girl. She used to catch fireflies in summer, Reed said, voice soft with memory. Put them in jars and set them by her bed like lanterns. Sarah, her mother, my wife, tried to tell her the fireflies would die. Mary said they needed to shine somewhere beautiful before they went out. That was her heart. Always trying to save things. Hope grabbed at Reed's watch chain. He let her, smiling tentatively. She saved Hope, Clay said. Saved me too. And maybe she's saving you now if you let her. Reed looked at him. You're a good man, Bennett. Better than most I've known. I'm just a man trying his best, same as you're learning to be. Ruth started staying later in the evenings, helped put Hope to bed, sat with Clay by the fire after talking about everything and nothing. They didn't speak about what was growing between them, safer, not to name it safer, to let it develop slow and steady, like spring coming to frozen ground. But Clay felt it. The way her hand lingered on his when she passed him coffee. The way she smiled at him holding Hope. The way his heart kicked when he heard her voice outside. One night, Hope finally asleep, after an hour of fussing, Ruth stood to leave. Clay walked her to the door like always, but this time he caught her hand. Ruth. Yes. He couldn't find words. 2 years of grief had stolen his ability to speak about feelings without choking. So instead, he pulled her close, kissed her properly this time, long and gentle, and full of everything he couldn't say. When they broke apart, she was crying. I've been waiting for that, she whispered. I'm still broken in places. Still grieving. Sarah probably always will be. I can't promise. I'm not asking for promises, Clay. I'm asking for honesty. For trying. That's all. She touched his face. I loved my husband. Lost him 5 years back. That grief don't go away. But it makes room for new things if you let it. Sarah taught you how to love. Let that be a gift, not a curse. He kissed her again. Softer. Like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, but wanted desperately to try. Stay, he said. Not forever, not tonight. But stay a while longer, please. She stayed. They sat by the fire, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, not talking. Just being. Outside, February wind howled, but inside was warm. Hope woke crying near midnight. Ruth started to rise, but Clay touched her shoulder. Let me. He picked up. Hope changed her, gave her a bottle while humming hymns. Ruth watched from the fire, smiling. You're a natural, she said. I'm a fake it till you make it. Clay grinned. But I'm getting better. Hope fell asleep mid-feeding, milk drunk and content. Clay put her back in the cradle Reed had brought, watched her chest rise and fall, still marveling that this small person was his. "I'm terrified every day," he admitted, voice low, so he wouldn't wake her. "Terrified I'll do something wrong. Terrified she'll get sick again. Terrified the law will change its mind. Terrified I'll lose her like I lost—" "I know," Ruth said. She came to stand beside him. "But fear just means you love her. And that's the most important part." "Is it enough?" "It's everything." They stood together watching Hope sleep, and Clay thought maybe, just maybe, life was giving him a second chance at happiness he'd thought was buried with Sarah. The trouble came on a Thursday. Clay was in town for supplies. Hope with him. Ruth meeting them at the general store. Warren Kent was there looking sour, barely acknowledged them. Clay loaded flour and coffee into his wagon. Hope bundled against March cold when Sheriff Briggs approached with an expression Clay had learned meant bad news. "Clay, got something you need to see." Briggs handed him a telegram, official letterhead from the territorial governor's office. Investigation opened into custody case Hope Bennett. Allegations of improper influence on Judge Franklin. Case under review. Custody status pending. Clay's hands went numb. What does this mean? Means someone filed a complaint. Claims the hearing was biased, that Reed withdrew under duress, that the judge didn't follow proper procedure. Briggs looked apologetic. "Governor's sending an investigator. Should arrive next week." "Who filed the complaint?" Briggs glanced at Warren Kent, who was pretending not to listen while obviously listening. "Can't prove it, but I got suspicions." Clay crossed to where Kent stood. Ruth grabbed his arm, but he shook her off gently. "You did this." Kent looked up, eyes cold. "I don't know what you're talking about, Bennett." "You filed that complaint. You couldn't stand losing, couldn't stand that Reed saw sense, so you went around the law." "I followed the law." Kent's voice was smooth, practiced. "If there were irregularities in the hearing, the governor has a right to investigate. That's not personal. That's procedure. It's revenge. It's justice." Kent smiled, thin and mean. A single rancher with no education, no wife, no resources, raising a girl child. That was never going to stand, Bennett. Judge Franklin made a mistake. The governor will correct it. Clay's fist clenched. Ruth stepped between them. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't give him what he wants." Clay forced himself to breathe, to unclench his hand, to step back. "You're a small man, Kent. Small and bitter and afraid of anything that makes you feel small. I almost feel sorry for you." Kent's face flushed. "We'll see who's small when that investigator arrives. We'll see who keeps that baby." Clay turned away, collected Hope from the wagon, where she sat watching with wide eyes, and walked toward his horse. Ruth followed Briggs behind her. "Clay, I'll testify again," Briggs said. "Tell the investigator what I saw. Others will too." "Will it matter?" "I don't know, but it's worth trying." At the boarding house, Ruth made coffee. Neither of them drank. Hope played on the floor, oblivious to the storm gathering. "We could leave," Clay said. "Tonight. Take Hope and go. That's what Kent wants. Wants you to run so he can tell everyone you're guilty, that you had something to hide. I don't care what he tells people. I care about keeping Hope." Ruth grabbed his hands. "If you run, they'll hunt you. Law will brand you a kidnapper. Hope will grow up with that hanging over her. You'll never be safe. And if I stay, if this investigator decides with Kent, then we fight. We get lawyers. We appeal. We make so much noise the governor can't ignore what's right." Her eyes were fierce. "But we fight, Clay. We don't run." He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that right would win. But he'd seen enough of the world to know money and influence usually beat right. That night, Clay wrote to Reed. Explained the situation, asked for help, legal help, influential help, whatever the cattle baron could provide. Hated asking, hated needing. But Hope mattered more than pride. Reed's reply came 3 days later by telegram: lawyers en route. Will attend hearing. We fight together. Reed. The investigator arrived on Monday. A thin man named Calloway with spectacles and a ledger and the demeanor of someone who'd already decided the outcome before hearing evidence. He spent 2 days interviewing townspeople. Some spoke for Clay Sheriff Briggs Ruth, the women who'd helped teach him baby care. Others spoke against him, Warren Kent of course, plus a handful of folks who'd always thought a single man raising a girl was improper, regardless of circumstances. Calloway inspected Clay's cabin, walking through it like he was appraising property, not a home. He watched Clay with hope, taking notes. Expression revealing nothing. On the third day, Calloway called a formal hearing. Same town hall, same crowd, different judge. Clay stood with hope in his arms, Ruth beside him, Reed and 2 lawyers behind. Across the room, Warren Kent sat with a smug expression that made Clay's blood boil. Calloway opened his ledger. I've completed my investigation into the custody case of the minor child Hope Bennett. I've heard testimony from multiple sources and reviewed the original hearing transcripts. My findings are as follows. The room held its breath. Judge Franklin's conduct was within acceptable bounds. While informal, the hearing followed territorial procedures for custody disputes. Mr. Reed's withdrawal of his claim was voluntary and witnessed. No evidence of coercion or undue influence. Clay felt Ruth's hand tighten on his arm. However, Calloway continued, and Clay's heart sank. Concerns remain about Mr. Bennett's suitability as guardian. He is unmarried, lives in relative isolation, and has limited resources. While his care for the child has been adequate is not optimal. Adequate! Ruth's voice rang out. That man saved her life, loves her like she's his own blood. That's more than adequate. Mrs. Winslow, please. Calloway adjusted his spectacles. My recommendation to the governor is this custody may remain with Mr. Bennett on the condition that he secures a proper household within 3 months. Specifically, he must marry a suitable woman who can provide maternal care and social respectability. Silence crashed through the hall. Clay stared. You're saying I have to get married or lose hope? I'm saying a child needs a mother and a father, a complete family unit. If you can provide that, custody stands. If not, the child should be placed with the territorial orphanage where proper care can be assured. That's blackmail, Reed's lawyer stood. The law doesn't require marriage for custody. The law gives me discretion in determining a child's best interests. Calloway closed his ledger with finality. 3 months, Mr. Bennett. I'll return for a follow-up inspection. If your circumstances have improved, custody continues. If not, we revisit placement options. He left, and pandemonium erupted. People shouted, some supporting Clay, others agreeing with Calloway. Warren Kent smiled like Christmas had come early. Clay stood frozen, hope crying in his arms, mind racing. Get married. To whom? How this wasn't how proposals happened, wasn't how families formed. This was legal coercion dressed up as proper procedure. Ruth pulled him outside, away from the crowd, into cold March air that felt like a slap. Clay, don't. Please don't say it. Say what? Whatever you're about to say. I can't think right now. Can't. He bounced hope, trying to calm her, trying to calm himself. This is insane. I can't just marry someone because the law says so. You could marry me. The words hung between them like a bridge over a chasm, terrifying and necessary and impossible to ignore. Clay looked at her. Really looked. Ruth Winslow, who'd taught him how to be a father, who'd stood beside him through every fight, who'd kissed him by firelight and made him believe life could be good again. That's not how this should happen, he said quietly. Not as a legal requirement. You deserve better than that. What I deserve is a say in my own future. Ruth's voice was steady. And I say yes. Yes to helping raise hope. Yes to building a family with you. Yes to all of it if you're willing. Ruth, I know you still love Sarah. I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking you to make room for me beside that love. I'm asking you to let us be a family you me hope, because that's what we've been becoming anyway, slow and steady. She took his hand. The law's just forcing us to name it sooner than we might have otherwise. But the feeling's real, or am I wrong about that? Clay couldn't speak. Everything was too much, too fast. But hope quieted in his arms, and Ruth's hand was warm in his, and somewhere Sarah's voice whispered in memory, "Let that be a gift, not a curse." "You're not wrong," he managed. "You're not wrong about any of it." "Then say yes, not because Calloway demands it, not because you'll lose hope otherwise. Say yes because you want to, because we could be happy, because life's giving us a second chance, and it'd be a shame to waste it." Clay looked at Hope, then at Ruth, then at the town hall where people argued about his life like he was a problem to be solved instead of a man trying his best. "Yes," he said. "Yes, Ruth Winslow, I'll marry you. And not because some bureaucrat says I have to. Because you're right. Because this feels like the first right thing I've chosen in 2 years." Ruth smiled through tears. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "It's the only proposal I've got." She kissed him then, right there in front of the town hall, in front of everyone still streaming out. Let them talk. Let them whisper. She didn't care. When they broke apart, Reed was standing nearby smiling. "Congratulations," he said. "For what it's worth, Mary would have approved. She always believed love finds a way even through legal nonsense." "You think this is right?" Clay asked. "Marrying because the law says so." "I think the law's giving you an excuse to do what you already wanted. That's not wrong. That's just life being complicated." Reed touched Hope's cheek. "And this little girl deserves all the love you two can give. That's what matters." Warren Kent emerged from the town hall, saw them standing together, and his expression went ugly. "You think you've won, Bennett? You think marriage fixes everything?" "I think you've lost Kent, lost this fight, lost whatever respect you had, lost everything that matters." Clay's voice was hard. "And I think you need to learn when to walk away." Kent opened his mouth closed. It turned and left. Defeated finally, truly, in a way that meant he had no moves left. Clay watched him go and felt something like pity. Then he looked at Ruth, at Hope, at Reed, standing awkwardly like he wanted to be part of this family, but didn't know how yet, and felt something better than pity. He felt hope, real hope, the kind that made you believe winter eventually ended and spring came for everyone, even cowboys who'd buried their hearts under cottonwood trees. "So," Ruth said, smiling, "when's the wedding?" "Soon as possible, before Calloway comes back, before anything else goes wrong." Clay grinned. "Before I lose my nerve." "You won't lose your nerve." "How do you know?" "Because I know you, Clay Bennett, and you don't quit. Not when it matters." She was right. He didn't quit. Not anymore. Not when he had so much worth fighting for. They walked home together through mud and melting snow. Hope between them, and made plans for a future that suddenly felt possible again. The wedding was set for 2 weeks out. Not because they needed time to plan, neither Clay nor Ruth cared about fancy ceremonies, but because the circuit preacher wouldn't be back through Bennett's Creek until then. 2 weeks to prepare to transform Clay's bachelor cabin into something resembling a home for 3, to let the town get used to the idea that the widowed rancher and the boarding housekeeper were making this official. Clay spent those weeks in a blur of activity that kept his hands busy and his mind from spinning out. He added a room to the cabin, hammering and sawing until his shoulders ached. Reed surprised him by sending 2 ranch hands to help men who worked quietly and didn't ask questions, just built walls and hung a door, and left Clay with space enough for a proper family. "It's too much," Clay told Reed when the older man came to inspect the work. "The hands, the lumber you sent, the cradle, everything. I can't pay you back." "I'm not asking you to." Reed ran his hand along the new doorframe, testing its strength. "Let me do this, Bennett. Let me help build something instead of tearing it down for once. Hope sat in her basket nearby, babbling at dust motes dancing in sunlight. She'd started making sounds that almost resembled words ba and da, and something that might have been ma, though Clay couldn't be sure. She's getting big, Reed said, voice catching slightly. Mary was like that. Reached milestones early, always in a hurry to grow up. He crouched beside the basket, let Hope grab his finger. I missed so much of her childhood. Too busy building an empire to notice my daughter was becoming a person without me. You're here now. Am I? Or am I just an old man trying to buy forgiveness with lumber and ranch hands? Clay sat on the floor beside him, took off his hat, wiped sweat from his forehead. You want honest truth. Always. You're both. You're a man trying to buy back time you can't have, and you're a grandfather learning to love without controlling. Both things are true. The question is, which one you're gonna feed? Reed looked at him. You're wiser than you look, Bennett. I'm just saying what Sarah would have said. She had a way of seeing through to the bones of things. Clay smiled, sad but genuine. She would have liked you, I think. The you're trying to be anyway. I would have liked to meet her. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Hope discover her own feet and try to eat them baby logic, making perfect sense of the world. You nervous? Reed asked. About the wedding. Terrified. Good sign. Means you care. Cared about Sarah too. Didn't stop her dying. Clay's throat tightened. What if I'm cursed, Reed? What if everyone I love ends up... Stop! Reed's voice was firm. I've spent 2 years blaming myself for Mary's death, for Thomas's death, for every choice I made that pushed them toward tragedy. That kind of thinking don't honor the dead. It just poisons the living. Then what do? We live. We love the people in front of us as hard as we can for as long as we get them. That's all we can do. Reed stood, knees creaking. And we teach this little girl that fear don't get to win. That love's worth the risk of loss. That's what Mary would want. What Sarah would want too, I'd wager. Clay nodded, not trusting his voice. After Reed left, Clay sat with Hope, holding her close, breathing in that baby smell of milk and soap and pure potential. Your mama Mary was brave, he told her. And Sarah, the woman who would have been your mama if things were different, she was brave too. I gotta try to be as brave as them. Gotta try to deserve this second chance. Hope grabbed his nose, squeezed hard enough to hurt, and laughed when he made a surprised sound. Yeah. Clay smiled through tears. I reckon you're right. No use crying about it. Just gotta do the living. Ruth came by every evening after closing the boarding house, brought fabric for curtains, taught Clay how to hang them properly, laughed when he got tangled in muslin and had to be rescued. You're hopeless with domestic things, she teased, standing on a chair to reach the rod. That's why I'm marrying you. Need someone to keep me from hanging myself with curtains. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said. I'm working on it. She climbed down, stood close, hands on his chest. Clay, are you sure about this? Really sure? Because if you're just doing it for Hope for the law, I'm doing it for me. He caught her hands. For us. The law gave me an excuse, but this is real. You know that, right? I know. I just need to hear you say it sometimes. I love you, Ruth Winslow. Not the same way I loved Sarah. That was a different life, different people. But this is real and true, and I want it. Want you. Want the life we're building. She kissed him, then soft and lingering, and Hope made a disgusted baby sound that had them both laughing. Even she knows that's enough sentiment for one day, Ruth said. She's practical like her mama, both her mamas. Ruth's eyes went soft. You think Mary would approve of me raising her daughter? I think Mary chose me because she trusted my judgment. So yeah, I think she'd approve. I think she'd be grateful you're here teaching Hope how to be strong and kind and everything good. The night before the wedding, Clay couldn't sleep. He sat on his porch in April cold that had finally lost winter's teeth, watching stars that didn't care about human troubles and talked to ghosts. Sarah, if you can hear me, and I don't know if you can. Don't know if that's even how it works, but if you can, I need you to know something. I'm marrying Ruth tomorrow, and I love her. And that don't mean I stopped loving you. Don't mean what we had wasn't everything. The wind blew carrying pine scent from the mountains. I hope you're all right with this. Hope you understand. I tried to die with you. Tried to bury myself alongside you and our boy. But life wouldn't let me. Found hope. Found Ruth. Found reasons to keep breathing. His voice broke. I'm happy, Sarah. For the first time since you left, I'm happy. And I feel guilty about that. Feel like I'm betraying something. But I'm doing it anyway, because I think that's what you'd want. I think you'd kick my ass for moping around when there's living to do. Silence answered. Stars kept burning. The world kept turning. So I'm saying goodbye to the life we had. Not to you, never to you, but to the idea that I died with you. I'm saying hello to what comes next. Clay wiped his eyes. Take care of our boy up there. Tell him his daddy loved him, loves him still. And tell him he's got a sister now who's going to hear all about him, about both of you, so she knows where she comes from. Inside, Hope cried. Clay went to her, lifted her from the cradle, held her close while she settled. Tomorrow changes everything, he whispered. Tomorrow, you get a mama officially. Tomorrow, we become a real family in the eyes of God and the law, and everyone who's been watching to see if we'd make it. Hope grabbed his shirt, held tight, and Clay figured that was answer enough. The wedding happened at noon in Bennett's Creek Church, a small building that smelled like pine and faith and held maybe 30 people if everyone breathed in. Ruth wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, carried wildflowers Clay had picked that morning. Clay wore his only suit, brushed clean, smelling of cedar and hope. Hope wore a white christening gown Ruth had sewn, refused to sit still through the ceremony, made everyone laugh when she grabbed the preacher's Bible and tried to eat it. Reed stood as witness for Clay. Sheriff Briggs stood for Ruth. The church was packed with townspeople who'd watched this whole strange story unfold and wanted to see the ending or the beginning, depending on how you looked at it. The preacher was an old man named Father Morrison, who'd married half the couples in Montana Territory and buried the other half. His voice was rough but kind when he began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted by God. Clay barely heard the words. He was too focused on Ruth's face, on the way she smiled at him with tears in her eyes, on the way Hope had finally settled and was watching everything with baby solemnity. Clay Bennett, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? I do. His voice was steady. Sure. Ruth Winslow, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? I do. She squeezed his hands. By the power vested in me by Montana Territory and Almighty God, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Clay kissed her while the church erupted in applause, and Hope made a loud, disapproving sound that had everyone laughing again. They walked out into spring sunshine, married legal, a family in every sense that mattered. Warren Kent stood across the street watching. Didn't approach, didn't congratulate. Just watched with an expression Clay couldn't read, anger maybe, or resignation, or something more complicated. Then he turned and walked away, and Clay decided that was ending enough for him. The reception was at the boarding house, simple food and fiddle music, and dancing that Clay was terrible at, but tried anyway, because Ruth laughed when he stepped on her feet. Reed gave a toast that was awkward and earnest. I don't have much experience with happiness. Spent most of my life chasing money and respect and things that don't matter. But watching Clay and Ruth, watching hope grow, I'm learning what does matter. So here's to family, the ones we're born with and the ones we choose. May you all be as brave as Mary was, and as loving as Clay and Ruth are teaching me to be. People drank to that, even the ones who didn't fully understand the complicated history behind the words. Sheriff Briggs clapped Clay on the shoulder. You did good, Bennett. Real good. Just did what needed doing. That's what good men do. Briggs smiled. Calloway comes back in 10 weeks. You'll be ready. We'll be ready, Ruth corrected, appearing beside Clay with hope in her arms. All three of us. That night in the expanded cabin that now felt like home, Clay and Ruth put Hope to bed together. Ruth sang a lullaby Clay didn't know something her own mother had sung. Hope's eyes drooped, fighting sleep finally surrendering. They stood over the cradle watching her breathe, and Clay felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the love, the terror that something could go wrong. You're thinking too much, Ruth said softly. Can't help it. Yes, you can. Here. She took his hand, led him to the new bedroom, closed the door. They sat on the bed. Their bed now, not just Clay's, and she made him look at her. We're married. We're a family. Hope is ours. The law says so, God says so, and most importantly, we say so. So stop waiting for disaster and just be here. Be present. Be happy. I don't know if I remember how. Then I'll teach you. Same way I taught you how to change diapers and warm bottles and all the other things you didn't know. She kissed him. We'll figure it out together. They lay down together, still dressed, just holding each other. Listening to Hope breathe in the next room, and Clay thought maybe this was what healing felt like. Not forgetting the past. Not pretending the pain never happened. Just making room for new joy beside old grief. Letting both exist without one destroying the other. The weeks passed quickly. Spring came full force, mud and wildflowers, and snow melting in the mountains. Clay worked his ranch with new energy. Ruth managed the boarding house and their home with equal efficiency. Hope grew daily, laughed constantly, had both of them wrapped around her tiny fingers. Reed visited every week, always bringing something, books for Hope's future supplies for the ranch, once a rocking chair he'd carved himself, with shaking hands that had forgotten how to make anything without buying it first. It's crooked, he admitted, embarrassed. It's perfect, Ruth said, testing it. Better than store-bought because it's got love in it. Reed's eyes went wet. Mary used to say that. About things I bought her. Said she'd rather have something made with love than purchased with money. She was right. She usually was. I just never listened. On the 8th week, a letter arrived from Calloway. Short official cold will conduct follow-up inspection April 28th. Expect formal household evaluation. 2 weeks. They had 2 weeks to prove they were a proper family, whatever that meant. Ruth found Clay staring at the letter, anxiety written in every line of his body. We're ready, she said firmly. What if we're not? What if he finds something wrong, something we missed? Then we fix it. But Clay, look at us. Look at Hope. We're not faking this. We're not performing for the law. We're living it. That's got to count. Does it? Or are we just lucky the timing worked out? Ruth grabbed his face, made him focus. Stop. You're spiraling. Hope needs you present, not panicking. I need you present. So breathe. Trust that we've built something real, and let Calloway see what everyone else sees, a family that works. Clay breathed, nodded, tried to believe her. The night before Calloway's inspection, Clay couldn't settle. He cleaned the cabin 3 times, checked and rechecked that everything was proper, worried over details that probably didn't matter. Ruth finally grabbed his hands, stopped him mid-motion. Sit. I need to sit. He sat. She sat beside him, Hope between them, playing with wooden blocks. Tell me what you're really afraid of, Ruth said. Losing her. Losing this, losing everything again. And if that happened, if worst came to worst, I don't know if I'd survive it. Yes, you would, because you survived losing Sarah and your son, and that was worse than anything Calloway can do. Ruth's voice was gentle but firm. But it won't come to that, because we're good parents, because Hope is loved and healthy and happy, because the law already said yes once and we've done everything they asked. So stop borrowing trouble and just be here now, with us, with your family. Clay looked at Hope, who'd abandoned her blocks and was trying to eat Ruth's sleeve. Looked at Ruth, who'd married him despite his broken places and his ghosts. Looked at the home they'd built together, physical and emotional, and felt something settle in his chest. You're right. I know. How are you so calm? Because I've already lost everything once, and I learned that fear don't protect you from loss. It just steals the joy you could have right now. She kissed his cheek. So I'm choosing joy, and I'm asking you to choose it with me. I'm trying. Then try harder. She smiled. That's all any of us can do. That night, Clay slept better than he had in weeks. Woke to Hope crying for her morning, feeding Ruth, already moving to get her sunlight streaming through curtains they'd hung together. He lay in bed for a moment, listening to Ruth singing softly to Hope, and thought, this is worth fighting for. This is worth everything. When Calloway arrived at noon, Clay was ready. Not because the cabin was perfect, though it was clean and organized. Not because he'd rehearsed what to say, though he'd practiced in his head. He was ready because he'd stopped performing and started believing. This was his family. Real, messy, imperfect, and absolutely worth defending. Calloway stepped down from his carriage ledger in hand, expression neutral. He looked older than Clay remembered, tired in a way that suggested he'd seen too many broken families and not enough successful ones. Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Bennett. He nodded to each. Shall we begin? They began. Calloway walked through the cabin, noting the new room, the cradle, the children's books waiting for Hope to grow into them. He watched Clay change Hope's diaper, watched Ruth feed her, watched them work together with the easy rhythm of people who'd learned each other's patterns. He asked questions. How did they divide responsibilities? What were their plans for Hope's education? How did they handle disagreements? What role did Mr. Reed play in the child's life? Clay answered honestly. Ruth filled gaps he missed. Hope sat on the floor, playing with blocks occasionally, looking up at the strange man with his ledger, like she was judging him too. Finally, Calloway closed his notebook. I've seen enough. Clay's heart stopped. And you've done exactly what I asked. Established a proper household. Provided maternal and paternal care. Created stability. Calloway's expression softened slightly. I'll be honest, Mr. Bennett. When I gave you that ultimatum, I expected you to fail. Expected you'd choose pride over practicality and lose the child as a result. I don't care about pride. I care about hope. I see that now. I see it in how your wife looks at that child like she's hers. I see it in how you work together. I see it in how that baby responds to both of you with trust and affection. Calloway reopened his ledger, wrote something, signed it. My recommendation to the governor is that custody remain with Clay and Ruth Bennett permanently. No further inspections, no conditions. Just a family raising their daughter. The words hit like physical force. Clay couldn't breathe. Ruth grabbed his hand, held tight. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me. Thank yourselves. You did the work. Calloway handed Clay the signed document. Keep this safe. You might need it someday if anyone questions your right to parent this child. He left, and Clay stood holding official permission to keep loving his daughter, and broke down completely. Ruth held him while he wept, years of fear and grief and desperate hope finally releasing. Hope, sensing something important, crawled over and patted his knee with a sticky hand, babbling comfort in her own language. We did it, Ruth whispered. We actually did it. You did it. You made this possible. We did it together. That's how families work. Later, after Hope was asleep and the cabin was quiet, Clay and Ruth sat on the porch watching sunset paint the mountains gold. "Reed's coming by tomorrow," Clay said. "Wants to take Hope to visit Mary's grave. Thought it was time." "That's good. She should know where she comes from." "Both her mamas." "Both her mamas," Ruth agreed. She leaned against him. "You think Mary would approve of us? Of how Hope's turning out?" "I think Mary's resting easy knowing her daughter's loved. That's all any parent wants." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken, watching stars emerge one by one. "Clay?" "Yeah. I'm happy." "Me too." "Don't sound so surprised about it." He laughed, pulled her closer. "Just getting used to it is all. Getting used to life being good again." "Better get used to it quick, because I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me and Hope for the long haul." "Can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be stuck." They went inside together, checked on Hope one more time, still sleeping peaceful loved, and went to bed in a home that had finally become more than walls and roof. Had become the place where healing happened, where hope lived, where family meant something deeper than blood. Outside April became May. Winter's last grip finally released. And in a cabin at the base of Montana mountains, three people who'd found each other against all odds slept safe and warm, dreaming of spring and summer, and all the tomorrows they'd fought so hard to keep. Reed arrived the next morning with forget-me-nots wrapped in brown paper, the delicate blue petals trembling in his weathered hands. Clay watched from the porch as the old man dismounted, moving slower than he had back in winter, like the weight of everything had finally settled into his bones. "Thought we'd go today," Reed said, voice rough. "To see Mary, if that's still all right." "More than all right." Clay came down the steps, hope bundled against the May chill that still lingered in morning shadows. "Ruth's packing food. Figured we'd make a day of it." Reed's eyes went to Hope, and something in his face softened. "She looks more like Mary every day, around the mouth especially. Mary had that same serious expression when she was thinking. Hope's a thinker, that's for sure. Watches everything like she's figuring out how the world works. Mary was like that too. Used to drive me crazy the way she'd just stare at things. I thought she was being stubborn. Turns out she was just seeing deeper than I could." Reed touched the flowers. "I brought these. They were Mary's favorite. She used to pick them wild and put them all over the house. Said they were proof that beautiful things could survive Montana winters." Ruth emerged with a basket, smiled at Reed. "Those are lovely. She had good taste." "She had better taste than her father deserved." Reed's voice caught. "In everything." They rode out together, Clay and Ruth on the wagon with Hope between them, Reed on his horse alongside. The cemetery sat on a hill east of town, where wind kept the snow from piling too deep in winter, and wildflowers grew thick in summer. Clay's first stop was at two graves under cottonwood trees. "Give me a minute," he said quietly. Ruth took Hope, let Clay approach alone. He stood between Sarah's grave and their son's, a tiny marker that just said, "Beloved baby Bennett, born and died February 1871. Clay crouched, touched both stones. "Hey, Sarah. Hey, little one." His throat tightened. "Brought someone for you to meet, sort of. Her name's Hope. She's 8 months old now, healthy, happy. She's got a good mama in Ruth, and she's got me trying my best." He wiped his eyes. "I'm doing all right. Better than all right. Finally learned how to live again instead of just surviving. You'd like Ruth. She's strong like you were. Patient like you were. She don't try to replace you. Just makes room for herself alongside the memory of you, and somehow that works." The wind blew through cottonwood leaves, sounding almost like whispers. "I love her, Sarah. Love her different than I loved you, but just as real. And I love Hope like she's my own blood, which I guess she is now in every way that matters." He stood, touched both stones one more time. "You're not forgotten. Won't ever be forgotten. But I'm moving forward. Hope you're all right with that. Hope you and our boy are someplace good, someplace peaceful. Till I see you again." He walked back to where Ruth waited, took Hope in his arms, and they moved across the cemetery to where Mary Reed's grave sat alone in fresh earth that hadn't settled yet. The stone was simple granite, expensive but understated. Mary Catherine Reed, 1853 to 1874. Beloved daughter, beloved mother, may she rest in the peace she couldn't find here. Reed stood frozen, staring at words he'd chosen, but couldn't quite believe were real. I haven't been here since the burial, he admitted. Couldn't face it. Couldn't face what I'd done. You didn't kill her, Reed. Ruth's voice was gentle. Choices led to tragedy, but that's not the same as murder. Feels the same some days. Clay stepped forward, holding Hope. Mary, this is your daughter. Her name is Hope Bennett. She's strong and stubborn and smart, just like her mama must have been. She's got a family now, me and Ruth, and even your father, who's trying real hard to be better than he was. He paused, collecting himself. You made a brave choice leaving her with me. I won't ever let you down on that. She'll know where she comes from. Know about you and Thomas Webb and the love you had. Know that you chose safety over everything else because that's what real love looks like. Reed knelt, placed the forget-me-nots on the grave with shaking hands. Mary, I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry for everything I did and didn't do. For driving you away. For Thomas. For all the years I spent building an empire instead of knowing my daughter. His voice broke completely. But I'm trying to do right by Hope. Trying to be the grandfather you needed me to be as a father. It's too late for us, but maybe it's not too late for her. Hope reached toward the flowers, making her grabbing motion. Ruth helped her touch the petals, gentle. Pretty, Ruth said. These were your first mama's favorite flowers. We'll plant some at home so you can see them every spring. They stood together in silence, four people connected by loss and love, and the fragile hope that broken things could be mended if you worked hard enough. Finally, Reed stood, wiped his face. Thank you. For bringing her. For letting me be part of this. Your family, Clay said simply. That's what family does. They spread the picnic lunch on a blanket near Mary's grave, eating bread and cheese, while Hope crawled around exploring grass and flowers and the edges of her new world. Reed told stories about Mary as a girl, how she'd rescue injured animals, how she'd taught herself to read before school started, how she'd once stood up to a bully twice her size because he was being cruel to a smaller child. She was brave her whole life, Reed said. I just didn't see it because her bravery looked different than mine. She was brave in kindness. I was only brave in business. You're being brave now, Ruth pointed out. Takes courage to admit mistakes. Takes courage to change. Does it count if I'm only changing because I lost everything that mattered? Yes, Clay said firmly. Pain teaches if we let it. You're letting it. That counts. On the ride home, Hope fell asleep against Ruth's shoulder, exhausted from her first cemetery visit. Clay drove the wagon, while Reed rode alongside, and they talked about everything and nothing. Whether cattle prices, the new family moving into Kent's old house since Warren had left town the week before, defeated and bitter and gone. Heard he moved to Denver, Reed said, trying to start over where nobody knows him. Hope he finds peace, Clay said, and meant it. Man that angry is his own worst enemy. I know something about that. Reed was quiet for a moment. Clay, I want to do something. For Hope's future. Beyond the trust fund I already set up. Reed, you've done enough. Hear me out. I want to deed you a section of land. Good grazing land adjacent to your property. Enough to expand your operation, make it something you can pass to Hope someday. Not charity, an investment in her future. Clay's hands tightened on the reins. That's too much. It's not enough. It'll never be enough to make up for what I failed to give Mary. But it's something. It's practical. And it means when I'm gone, Hope will have security. You and Ruth will have security. That matters. Ruth spoke up from behind. Accept it, Clay. Let him do this. Ruth. Let him do this, she repeated firmly. Pride won't feed hope or keep the ranch running when times get hard. This is Reed trying to be a grandfather. Let him." Clay looked at Reed, saw the hope in the old man's eyes, the desperate need to contribute something meaningful. "All right," he said finally. "But on one condition. You teach Hope about ranching when she's old enough. Teach her everything Mary would have learned if you'd let her. Teach her the good parts of what you built without the hard parts that came with it." Reed's eyes filled. Deal. Summer arrived with heat and green grass and Hope's first birthday in June. They celebrated at the cabin with a cake, Ruth baked, Reed bringing gifts. He'd clearly spent weeks choosing a wooden rocking horse, a silver spoon engraved with Hope's initials, a leather-bound book of fairy tales. "She can't read yet," Clay pointed out, laughing. "She will someday. And when she does, I want her first book to be from me." Hope destroyed the cake with both hands, getting more frosting in her hair than her mouth, laughing when Clay tried to clean her up, and she smeared it on his face instead. "She's got your sense of humor," Ruth told him. "No, that's pure Mary," Reed said, smiling. "Mary did the exact same thing on her first birthday. Ate maybe 3 bites and wore the rest. Her mother was mortified. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen." "What changed?" Ruth asked gently. "Between then and later?" Reed was quiet, watching Hope play. "I got successful. Started caring more about what people thought than what my daughter needed. Started measuring everything by money and status instead of love and connection. By the time I realized what I'd lost, Mary was grown, and I didn't know her anymore." "You're knowing Hope," Clay said. "That's what matters now." "Is it enough knowing a granddaughter when I failed so completely as a father? It's more than nothing, and it's more than you gave yourself a year ago." Clay put a hand on Reed's shoulder. "You don't get to undo the past. None of us do. But you get to be present now. That's all any of us can offer, showing up, doing better, loving harder. The rest takes care of itself." Hope crawled over, pulled herself up, using Reed's knee, and held out frosting-covered hands. "Up," she said clearly. Her first real word. Reed froze. "Did she just—" "Up," Hope insisted. Reed lifted her carefully, this tiny person who'd given him a second chance at being human. She smeared frosting on his expensive vest and laughed, and Reed laughed too, really laughed, maybe for the first time in years. "Up it is, little one. Up it is." That fall, Clay and Reed rebuilt the fence line between their properties, working side by side in autumn sunshine. Hope played nearby, watched over by Ruth, who sat reading while keeping one eye on the increasingly mobile baby. "She'll be walking soon," Reed said, hammering a post. "Mary walked at 10 months, early for most babies. Hope's determined. When she wants something, she figures out how to get it." Clay wiped sweat. "Stubborn as all hell." "Gets that from both sides. Mary was stubborn. I'm stubborn. That baby never stood a chance." They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came from months of slowly building trust. Reed had dinner with them twice a week now, had a room at the cabin for nights when weather kept him from riding back to his ranch, had learned to change diapers and give bottles and read bedtime stories with voices for all the characters. "You're good at this," Clay told him one evening, watching Reed make Hope giggle with his rendition of the 3 Bears. "I'm adequate. You and Ruth are good at it. I'm just learning." That's all any parent is, someone learning as they go. "You're doing fine, Reed. Better than fine." Reed looked at him, eyes suspiciously bright. "Thank you for letting me try." "Thank you for trying." Winter came back around, but gentler this time. Clay stood at Bennett Creek, crossing in December. Hope bundled on his back, in the sling she'd mostly outgrown, and remembered finding her in this exact spot a year ago. "You were dying right here," he told her, voice rough. Blue lips frozen, barely breathing. "I didn't know if you'd make it to the cabin. Didn't know if I could save you. Didn't know anything except I had to try." Hope patted his cheek with a mittened hand. "Da. Yeah, baby. Da, be." His throat tightened. "You saved me too, you know. I was drowning when I found you. going through motions waiting to die. You gave me a reason to keep fighting. Gave me back a life worth living. Ruth came up behind them, put her arms around both. You're going to make yourself cry standing out here in the cold talking to a 1-year-old. Can't help it. Lot of memories at this crossing. Good memories now. That's what matters. They built a cairn there, stacking stones to mark the place where everything changed. Ruth carved words into a flat piece of wood, Clay mounted on top. Here hope was found, November 1873. Reed helped adding stones from his ranch from Mary's grave, from places that meant something. This is where my daughter's last act of love happened, he said quietly. Where she saved her baby by trusting a stranger. Should be remembered. It will be, Clay promised. We'll bring hope here every year. Tell her the story. Make sure she knows how loved she was from the very beginning. Spring came again, completing the cycle. Hope took her first steps in April, right before her second birthday, toddling from Ruth to Clay with a huge smile and complete confidence that they'd catch her. Did you see that? Clay grabbed her, lifted her high. Did you see our girl walk? I saw. Ruth was crying happy tears. She's growing up. Too fast, Clay said, but he was smiling. Reed visited that afternoon, found them in the yard teaching Hope to throw a ball. She couldn't do it yet, just kind of dropped it and laughed, but they cheered like she'd done something miraculous. She's beautiful, Reed said, and Clay knew he was seeing Mary in her, the dark hair, the serious expression, the way she studied everything before acting. She is, Clay agreed. Both her mamas were beautiful. She's got the best of all of us. And the worst, probably. Reed smiled. My stubbornness, your tendency to overthink Ruth's refusal to back down. That child's going to be a handful. Looking forward to it. They sat on the porch while Hope played, watching her toddle around with the confidence of someone who didn't know falling was failure, just part of learning. I got something for you, Reed said, pulling out a document. Deed to that land I promised. Had the lawyers finalize it. It's yours and Hope's. Can't be contested, can't be taken. It's family land now. Clay took it, hands shaking slightly. Reed, this is... Don't. Just take it. Let me do this one thing right. You've done more than one thing right. You're here. You're present. You're loving Hope the way she deserves. That's everything. Is it some days I still feel like I'm just an old man trying to buy forgiveness? Then stop feeling and start knowing. You're her grandfather. Your family. The money and land are nice, but what Hope needs is you. Just you showing up, being consistent. That's the gift. Reed nodded, not trusting his voice. Hope toddled over, climbed into Reed's lap uninvited, and stuck her thumb in her mouth. Just sat there, comfortable, safe, completely trusting. Gampa, she said around her thumb. Reed broke, just absolutely broke. Held this tiny person who'd saved him without knowing it, and wept into her hair. Yeah, sweetheart. Grandpa. I'm your grandpa. 2 years after finding Hope in the snow, Clay stood in his expanded cabin home. Now not just a shelter, and watched his family. Ruth at the table mending clothes, singing softly. Hope on the floor, building towers from blocks Reed had carved. The cradle in the corner empty now, but kept waiting for the baby Ruth was carrying, due in September. Can't believe we're doing this again, Clay said, touching Ruth's rounded belly. Scared, terrified. Good, she smiled. Means you haven't forgotten what a miracle it is. Never forgetting that. Hope brought him a block. "Da build." "Yes, ma'am." He sat on the floor, let her direct him in construction projects that made no architectural sense but perfect toddler logic. Reed knocked, let himself in without waiting for answer. That was family, now no formality, just belonging. Brought supplies from town. And mail. He handed Clay a letter. Official seal. Territorial government. Clay's stomach dropped. What now? Ruth asked, seeing his face. He opened it, read quickly, and started laughing. What? Ruth demanded. It's from the governor, thanking us for being an example of proper frontier family values, saying our case has been used as a model for orphan placement throughout the territory. He laughed harder. We're a model family. Us. Why is that funny? Reed asked. Because a year and a half ago, they were trying to take hope away. Now we're an example. The irony's rich. It's not irony, Ruth said firmly. It's truth. We are a model, not because we're perfect, but because we fought for each other, because we built something real out of broken pieces. That's worth modeling. She was right. Clay knew she was right. That evening, after Hope was in bed and Reed had gone home, and the cabin was quiet, Clay and Ruth sat on the porch, watching stars emerge. You ever think about that night I found her? Clay asked. How close we came to this never happening. Every day. I think about how brave Mary was, how brave you were, how all these impossible pieces had to fall exactly right for us to be sitting here now. You believe in fate, in things happening for a reason, Ruth considered. I believe in choices. Mary chose to save Hope. You chose to fight for her. Reed chose to change. I chose to love you both. Those choices built this family. Whether that's fate or just human beings being brave at the right moments, I don't know. But I'm grateful either way. Me too. Clay pulled her closer. Me too. Inside, Hope cried out in her sleep. Clay started to rise, but Ruth stopped him. She's fine, just dreaming. Listen. They waited. Hope settled, making small, contented sounds. She's safe, Ruth whispered. That's all Mary wanted, for Hope to be safe and loved, and given chances Mary never got. We gave her that. We're giving her that every day. We did good, Clay said. We did, and we'll keep doing good. With Hope, with the new baby, with whatever comes next. That's what families do. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their land stretch out under starlight, and Clay thought about all the ways life could break you, and all the ways it could heal you if you were brave enough to let it. He thought about Sarah and their son buried under cottonwoods, but never forgotten, always part of him. He thought about Mary Reed, who died giving her daughter a future, whose bravery echoed through everything they did. He thought about Reed, learning to be a grandfather, fighting against everything he'd been to become something better. He thought about Ruth, who loved broken things back to wholeness, who chose hope when giving up would have been easier. And he thought about Hope, small, determined, beautiful Hope, who'd been dying in the snow and was now asleep safe in her bed, dreaming toddler dreams, completely unaware that she'd saved 4 adults just by needing them. Thank you, Clay said quietly. For what? For saying yes, for fighting alongside me, for building this with me, for believing it was possible when I couldn't. Ruth kissed him. You would have done the same for me. In a heartbeat. Then we're even. They went inside together, checked on Hope one more time, still sleeping thumb in mouth, completely content, and went to bed in a home they'd built from nothing but determination and love. Outside Montana, winter settled in gentle. This year, snow falling soft instead of vicious, and morning would come with Hope's laughter, and Ruth's singing, and Reed's knock on the door, bringing gifts and stories and steady earned presents. Clay fell asleep thinking, this is what redemption looks like. This is what hope feels like. This is what family means, not blood, but choice. Not perfection, but showing up. Not forgetting the past, but building a future anyway. And in a basket hung on the wall, empty now, but preserved, a reminder remained. Sometimes the most broken people find each other at exactly the right moment and build something beautiful from all their shattered pieces. Hope was found in snow. Love was built through winter. And spring came for everyone who was brave enough to believe it could. The end and the beginning.